This is a pretty common sight if you own a 1978 to 1984 5-cylinder turbo diesel. You'll take the air cleaner off, maybe you find it's loose or rattling, and you take the housing off, and sure enough, one, two, or all three of these rubber mounts are broken, just like here. See, I've got this one's broken off, that one's broken off, this one's loose, that one's okay, but these take a huge amount of abuse due to the vibration of a diesel engine. And it's something you're probably going to have to change on a regular basis, depending upon how smooth your engine idles, okay? So I just want to show you in this video a couple things you can do to help prevent having to change these rubber shock mounts quite so often. Notice here, this one's loose. And that's something you really want to prevent. Once these loosen up like this and they're not tight in the threads on the bracket itself, then this will start moving and shaking and eventually will wear the hole out. If you get too much shake going on, then it puts stress on the other rubber mounts as well, and those will break off. Now I want to show you now a couple other brackets, and you'll get to see a couple other problems up close. On the underside of this bracket, you can see how that shock mount screws right into the hole and tightens down tight against the bracket here. Well, that one's broken, this one's broken, this one's broken. The problem is if this starts to loosen up, it'll even make it worse. So the solution here is to put a locking nut. Once you take and tighten the shock mount down tight onto the bracket, then you go on the back side and get a locking nut and tighten that down. You follow me? So when you do that, then this won't happen. Look at this one. Look how much that hole is enlarged. And then look at over here how much this hole has enlarged. You can see it just started loosening up and shaking in there, and eventually enlarged the hole so big that all your mounts are going to break very quickly. This one down here is also loose. So all three of these holes have been enlarged, and that all could have been prevented by putting a locking nut on the back side after installation. The other thing you have to be careful about, notice there's multiple holes in the bracket here. You need to make sure that when you install, just temporarily install the mounts and set the air cleaner on there, make sure all the holes line up. If they don't, you may have to adjust the alignment. Look at this mount here. See how it's twisted? It's actually out of line. And if you force this on, or otherwise if you force the air cleaner housing onto one of these mounts where it's twisting it, it's going to shorten the life, just like you see here, and it's going to break early. So you don't want these under stress when you put the air cleaner on to the bracket itself. Make sure the hole alignment is correct. The other thing here is that these are the wrong mounts. These are for non-turbo. The turbo are round, slightly larger. The other thing that causes early failure on these mounts is heat. Heat from the turbocharger. And as you saw in the previous scene where I was showing you the bracket on the engine, you had this one broken and this one broken, and the one here wasn't broken. Well, most of the turbocharger heat centers on these two, and vibration will cause early failure, but heat will also accelerate failure on these rubber mounts. So we have a solution for that. I'm going to show you that in the next scene. Over the years, I've put together a number of solutions for this problem on my website. First, we provide these heat shields. And I'm going to show you in a minute where these mount and how they protect the rubber mounts. Secondly, we provide you the correct turbo diesel mounts, and along with these mounts, we include 6 locking nuts and a new wing nut. Often these wing nuts get lost. But I'm just going to show you real quick here how you would install one of these using the heat shield. I'll just spin this one out. And even if the threads are ruined a little bit in yours, it's not going to be a big problem providing you install these using the lock nut. If the hole is fairly large, you may have to get a washer and put a washer underneath before you install the lock nut on the back side of the mount. So the first thing we'll do is put this heat shield in place like this. Now if you're using heat shields, then you definitely want to use locking nuts on the back side, because you're adding a little bit of mass here that can accelerate the vibration and wear on those thread holes. Now, you normally grab the bottom of the mount to tighten it up. There's a little steel plate both on the bottom. I think I can show it to you here. There's a steel plate here and a steel plate here. So when you're putting these on, you can tighten them down with a pair of pliers, but you don't want to tighten them on the rubber. You want to try to get a hold of the edge of one of those steel washers and then tighten it down. Notice here, when I remove this one, I won't grab it up here at the top to try to remove it. I'll grab it right down at the base and then loosen it up, and I can spin it the rest of the way up by hand. When you're using the heat shields, you can't get a hold of the base of the rubber mount. You can only get the, and you know, it's not going to help to get the plier on the heat shield. So what you want to do is tighten it down by hand as tight as you can, okay? And then just come up here at the top and just give it a little tweak. Now I will take one of the locking nuts. Now I think you can see why this is so important if you're using heat shields, that you definitely use a locking nut, because it's really hard to tighten the rubber mounts securely onto the bracket. Now I will get underneath here, I'll install that locking nut and tighten that down, and then I won't have any problem in the future with this thing starting to loosen up at all. Here you can see I have the 3 rubber mounts and heat shields installed. But before I install all the locking nuts, I'm going to go ahead and check alignment. This is really important because you don't want to go to the trouble to get those locking nuts down tight there and then have to remove them. I'm just going to grab the air filter housing. I don't even have to put it on completely. I'll just turn that elbow to the side, and I'm going to set this down. Watch this. Line those 3 holes up, and it should drop in place. See that? It should just drop in place. If you have to force it, in other words, if you have to get it on one, like here, and then you got to twist it real hard to get it on the other 2 or the other one, then you need to get the alignment right before you completely install this air filter housing, or you're going to have a premature failure on your new rubber shock mounts. You can just see why I love these flex head ratchet wrenches. This would be very difficult with a straight one, so watch as I tighten these 2 nuts down, and you can see the access and how easy it is with this type of ratchet. And while you're replacing those rubber mounts, I would recommend you get some satin black and repaint the air filter housing. Look at how much different it looks. I mean, it just makes the whole engine look a lot nicer when this has some new paint on it. And just imagine now you don't have to use that little 10mm nut, to try to tighten this down. It's much easier with a wing nut that we include in my kit. So when you do this, you want to tighten the wing nut down first, get that nice and snug. It'll come down and bottom out, but don't put too much force on it. And then go and tighten up the 4 snap clips like that. And just make sure it's right out on the edge. You want that clip right there on the edge before you snap it over. Okay, there it is. Look at that. Look how nice that is to have an air cleaner housing that's not rattling and shaking all over the place. And by the way, if you take your air filter housing off and you find out the bracket's broken, we now carry a reinforced. We personally reinforce it with extra welding here in my shop. So when you take your old OE bracket off and install it with this one, you're not going to have a broken bracket in the future either.